He didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait for a doctor. The moment that woman's body hit the gurney, and every trained professional in that hallway froze, Ethan Ward tore off his security jacket, pushed through the crowd, and put his hands on her chest like he'd done it 100 times in a war zone. Because he had. What nobody in that hospital knew, not the nurses, not the administrators, not even the woman gasping for air beneath his hands, was exactly who this quiet, tired man really was. And that secret. It was about to change both their lives forever. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. The call came at 2:47 in the morning. Not a phone call, not a radio dispatch. Just the sound, that particular unmistakable sound of automatic doors slamming open with the kind of force that meant someone was out of time. Ethan Ward heard it from the far end of the East Corridor, where he'd been doing his third round of the night coffee, long gone cold in his hand, the hallway empty and humming with that particular stillness that only a hospital at 2 a.m. can manufacture. He heard the doors. He heard the wheels of a gurney shrieking against linoleum. He heard a woman's voice, not screaming, which somehow made it worse, whispering, "Please, hurry up." 2 words, barely above a breath. But Ethan's body moved before his brain gave the order. That was muscle memory. That was 12 years of something he'd tried very hard to leave behind. He rounded the corner and took in the scene in under 3 seconds, the way he'd been trained to, not looking at it, but through it cataloging what mattered and discarding the rest. Gurney, female, mid-40s, blunt trauma, significant face lacerated along the left cheekbone color, wrong breathing, shallow and rapid. 2 EMTs on either side, both talking over each other. A nurse at the intake desk fumbling with a clipboard. A young resident couldn't have been more than 27 standing at the edge of the gurney with the particular deer-in-headlights expression that Ethan recognized immediately. Overwhelmed. Too much, too fast, no one leading. The woman on the gurney turned her head just slightly, just enough, and her eyes found his. They were dark, sharp. Even now, even like this, there was something behind them that didn't look like surrender. It looked like fury. Like a woman who was absolutely furious at her own body for putting her in this position. "Please," she said again. Quieter this time. Just for him. Ethan set down his coffee cup on the nurse's station ledge, took off his jacket, laid it over the back of a chair. "What's her BP?" he said. The resident blinked. "I'm sorry, who are—" "Blood pressure, right now. What is it?" One of the EMTs looked up. 84/50 when we loaded her. Dropped to 79 en route. Breath sounds. Diminished on the right. Ethan was already moving to the head of the gurney, his voice steady, his hands finding the woman's wrist with a precision that made the resident take a half step back. "Ma'am," he said directly to her. "I need you to stay with me. Can you do that?" She stared at him. Something flickered, confusion maybe, or recognition of something she couldn't name. "Your security," she said. It wasn't an insult, it was just what she saw. The uniform, the badge, the ordinary man in an ordinary job. "Tonight, I'm whoever you need me to be," Ethan said. "Now breathe slow. In through the nose." "I can't." "Yes, you can. I've seen people breathe in conditions you wouldn't believe. You can do this. In through the nose." She breathed. Shallow, ragged, but she breathed. "Good," he said. "You're doing good." He looked up at the resident. "She's got fluid building on the right side. You need imaging now, and you need someone senior in here, not in 5 minutes now. Page Dr. Harmon or whoever's on trauma tonight." "Dr. Harmon is in surgery." "Then get whoever's next. Go." The resident went. Her name, Ethan would learn later, was Olivia Hart. He didn't know that yet. In those first minutes, she was just a woman fighting to stay alive, and he was just a man who happened to know how to help her do it. That was the whole story as far as Ethan was concerned. That was always the whole story. But let's back up. Because to understand what Ethan Ward was doing in that hallway at 2:47 in the morning wearing a security guard uniform with a cold cup of coffee, you have to understand the 8 years that brought him there. He'd been a combat medic with the 75th Ranger Regiment for 12 years. 2 deployments to Afghanistan, 1 to Iraq. The kind of service that doesn't make the front page of anything, because the men who do it aren't interested in front pages. They're interested in keeping their guys breathing until the medevac arrives. Ethan was good at it. Better than good. He had the kind of hands that stayed steady when everything else was chaos. The kind of mind that could assess, prioritize, and act in the span of a heartbeat. His commanding officer, a hard-edged colonel from Tennessee, who didn't give compliments the way other men gave oxygen, had once told Ethan that he was the best combat medic he'd ever served with. Ethan had said, "Thank you, sir," and gone back to work. That was Ethan. That was always Ethan. He came home from his second deployment to a wife named Sarah, a 2-bedroom house in Columbus, Ohio, and the kind of quiet that felt at first like a gift. Sarah was a 3rd-grade teacher. She had laugh lines at the corners of her eyes and a habit of humming while she made coffee. And she was, in Ethan's honest and considered opinion, the best human being he had ever met. They had Grace 3 years after he got out. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, born on a Tuesday morning in April. With her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn silence, she didn't cry right away. She just looked around, taking everything in, like she was cataloging the world. "She's already judging us," Ethan had said. Sarah had laughed. He could still hear it. He would always be able to hear it. Sarah died on a Wednesday in February. Grace was 4 years old. An aneurysm, sudden, without warning, without the decency of giving anyone time to prepare. She'd been at school standing at the whiteboard explaining long division to 8-year-olds. She was there, and then she wasn't. The call came to Ethan's cell phone at 11:22 in the morning. He was at the grocery store standing in the cereal aisle, holding a box of the kind Grace liked, the ones with the marshmallows, trying to remember if they were out of milk. He remembered everything about that moment. The fluorescent light flickering above the Cap'n Crunch. The Muzak version of a song he couldn't identify. The way his hand went numb around the phone. He didn't cry in the store. He didn't cry at the hospital. He didn't cry at the funeral, where people kept touching his arm and saying, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." And he kept nodding, because what else do you do? He cried exactly once 3 weeks later, sitting on the kitchen floor at midnight, while Grace slept upstairs, holding one of Sarah's sweaters against his face. He cried until there was nothing left, and then he got up, washed his face, and went to check that the door was locked. Because Grace needed breakfast in the morning. Because someone had to make it. That was the moment Ethan Ward decided that the rest of his life was going to be about one thing: her. His daughter. His 4-year-old with her mother's eyes and his stubborn silence, who had started calling her stuffed rabbit Mama, and broke Ethan's heart quietly and completely every single day. He took the security job at St. Haven Hospital 14 months after Sarah died. People in his life, his mother, his army buddies, his neighbor Dave, who meant well, had opinions about this. They thought he was underutilizing himself. They thought he was hiding. They used phrases like, "so much potential, and you could be doing so much more." Ethan listened politely, and then went to work his shift. The truth he didn't share with anyone, because it wasn't the kind of truth you could explain to people who hadn't carried a rifle and a medical kit through a mountain pass at 3 a.m., was that he needed quiet. He needed something that didn't ask too much of him, because everything that was left after giving too much for too long, he was saving for Grace. Night shifts worked because his mother lived 20 minutes away and could stay over. They worked because Grace was in bed by 8 and up at 7, and Ethan could be home by 6, make her breakfast, take her to school, and sleep while she was gone. They worked because the hospital was in its strange way peaceful at night, the hum of machines, the occasional soft footsteps of nurses, the particular quiet of a building full of people who were fighting to stay alive. He understood that. He understood fighting to stay alive. He'd been at St. Haven for almost 2 years when Olivia Hart came through those doors. He knew her name by 3:15 in the morning when one of the nurses mentioned it while reaching for a chart. He recognized it not because he followed business news, but because St. Haven was in part funded by Hart Industries, and Olivia Hart's name was on a plaque in the lobby. He'd walked past it hundreds of times without giving it much thought. He had more time to think about it now, standing just outside the trauma bay, his jacket still folded over the nurse's station chair, listening to the controlled chaos of the medical team that had finally arrived and taken over. Dr. Reyes, the trauma attending, had looked at Ethan when she arrived, looked at the way the patient's vitals had stabilized in the last 8 minutes, looked at the specific way the oxygen was positioned and the IV line was running and said, "Who did this?" One of the EMTs had pointed at Ethan. Dr. Reyes had looked at him for a long moment, at his uniform, his badge, the cold cup of coffee now on the ledge. "Security," she said. "Yes, ma'am?" She didn't say anything else, but she nodded a small, precise nod and went back to work. Ethan retrieved his jacket, put it back on, and went back to his rounds. That was the job. That was what you did. He was back in the East Corridor, coffee now abandoned entirely, when he heard the footsteps behind him. Quick, purposeful. He turned. It was a nurse he didn't recognize, young, maybe 25, with a lanyard that said Jennifer, and the expression of someone who had been sent on a mission she didn't fully understand. "Are you the security guard? The one who in the trauma bay?" "Ward," he said. "Ethan Ward. Ms. Hart is asking for you." Ethan looked at her. "She's conscious." Jennifer hesitated. "She's very conscious. She's actually been asking for the past 10 minutes. The trauma bay had quieted. The machines still beeped. The lines still ran, but the frantic energy had settled into the particular focused calm of a situation that was for now under control. Dr. Reyes stood at the edge of the room, writing something on a tablet, and looked up briefly when Ethan came in. Olivia Hart was watching the door. Up close in the harsh light of the trauma bay, she looked different than she had on the gurney. Still pale, still hurt. The laceration on her cheek had been cleaned and dressed, and there was bruising beginning to show along her jaw and collarbone. An IV ran into her left arm. Monitoring leads ran under her gown. But her eyes were the same. Dark, sharp, and containing something that Ethan could only describe as refusal. Refusal to be diminished. Refusal to be pitied. Even now in a hospital bed with tubes in her arm and a blood pressure cuff on her wrist, Olivia Hart looked like a woman who was absolutely unwilling to let any of this be the thing that defined her. Ethan had seen that look before. He'd seen it on men in the field who were hurt bad, but wouldn't go down. He had the deepest possible respect for it. He stopped at the edge of her bed. "Ms. Hart." "You're the one," she said. Not a question. Her voice was low, roughened by what had happened, but steady. Controlled. "The security guard." "Yes." "They tell me you stabilized my blood pressure before the trauma team arrived." Her eyes moved over him, his uniform, his face, his hands, taking inventory. "They tell me the attending said another few minutes and things would have been significantly worse." "Dr. Reyes is being generous," Ethan said. "The EMTs did good work on the way in." "Don't do that." He looked at her. "Don't minimize it," she said. Her jaw tightened slightly. It cost her something, he could see that. "I don't like it when people minimize things. It's dishonest." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "All right," he said. "You're welcome." Something moved across her face. It might have been briefly, almost like a smile. Then it was gone. "I want to know your name," she said. "Your full name." "Ethan Ward." "Ethan Ward." She repeated it carefully like she was filing it. "How does a hospital security guard know how to do what you just did?" "I wasn't always a security guard." She waited. "Combat medic," he said. "Army." 12 years. She looked at him for a long moment. The machines beeped. Somewhere down the hall, a door opened and closed. "Why are you here?" she asked. Not unkindly. She seemed genuinely curious in the way of someone who was trying to understand something that didn't add up. A man with that background, working nights at a hospital. Why? It was the question everyone who got close enough eventually asked. It was the question Ethan had answered many different ways over the past 2 years, depending on who was asking, and how much of the truth he thought they could handle. He looked at Olivia Hart, at the strength in her face, and the hurt underneath it, at the woman who was clearly unaccustomed to being in a position where she couldn't simply decide her way out of something, and gave her the real answer. "My daughter," he said. "I do everything for my daughter." Something in her face shifted, just slightly. She looked at him differently now, not reassessing exactly. More like she was seeing something she hadn't expected to find. "How old?" she asked. 6. Her name's Grace. Olivia was quiet for a moment. "And her mother?" "Gone. 2 years ago." The word "gone" landed in the room the way it always did. Heavy, specific, carrying everything it didn't say. Olivia Hart, who had not flinched at any of this, who had maintained her composure through trauma and pain, and the indignity of lying in a hospital bed while strangers worked on her body. Olivia Hart looked at him, and something in her eyes went soft. Just for a second. Then it was gone, closed off, put away. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant it. He could tell the difference. "Thank you," he said. They looked at each other in the fluorescent quiet. Then Olivia said, "I want to do something for you, to thank you properly. Whatever you need, whatever would help you and your daughter. I have resources, Mr. Ward and I." "That's not necessary," Ethan said. "I know it's not necessary. I'm offering. I appreciate it." He meant that too. "But I didn't do anything that I wouldn't have done for anyone who came through those doors. That's not false modesty. That's just true." Her jaw tightened again. He was beginning to understand that this was what she did when she was frustrated. When a situation was not going the way she'd intended. "You're a difficult man to thank," she said. "I've been told." "By who?" "My daughter, mostly." And there it was, the thing she hadn't entirely closed off. It came back, that softness around her eyes. "Go home to her," Olivia said quietly. "You should go home to her." "Shift ends at 6, Ethan said. "I'll be there for breakfast." He reached down and picked up his cold cup of coffee from where he'd set it on the edge of the chair, looked at it, set it back down. "Get some rest, Ms. Hart," he said. "You're going to see the sunrise." He walked out. He was halfway down the east corridor when he heard Dr. Reyes's voice behind him, not calling to him, but talking to someone else, her words carrying in the quiet hallway. "I want that man's name in the incident report," she was saying. "What he did tonight that was not nothing. Someone needs to know who he is." Ethan kept walking. He'd spent a long time making sure nobody knew who he was. It was, in his experience, the safest way to be. By the time the sky outside the hospital windows began to shift from black to that deep, particular blue that comes just before dawn, Ethan was back at his station by the main entrance, refilling his coffee from the break room machine, listening to the building wake up around him. He thought about Grace. He thought about the way she'd been last night, when he'd tucked her in, already half asleep, one arm around the rabbit she called Mama, her small face completely unguarded in a way that she was increasingly beginning to guard in her waking hours. She was 6. She was already learning. He thought about a dark-eyed woman in a trauma bay who'd said, "Don't minimize it," like she was angry at the very idea of things being less than they were. He thought about the fact that she had not, in all of that, the pain, the fear, the helplessness, she had not once asked anyone to feel sorry for her. He understood that too, actually, more than he'd expected to. At 5:58 in the morning, 2 minutes before his relief arrived, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. He answered. Silence for a moment. Then, Mr. Ward. He recognized the voice, lower now, roughened by the night and whatever medication they'd given her, but unmistakable in its precision. Ms. Hart, he said, you should be sleeping. I don't sleep well in hospitals, she said. I never have. Most people don't. Another silence. He could hear the monitors in the background, the soft electronic rhythm of machines tracking a heartbeat. I looked you up, she said. What they gave me access to anyway. Your service record. Ethan said nothing. You were awarded the Silver Star, she said, in 2014, in Afghanistan. That's in the record, yes. It's not a small thing, Mr. Ward. It felt like a small thing at the time, he said honestly. There were people around me who deserved it more. She made a sound, not quite a laugh, but something adjacent. You really are the most genuinely humble person I've ever spoken with. It's either remarkable or aggravating. I haven't decided which. My daughter says aggravating. Your daughter sounds very smart. She is. No hesitation. She's the smartest person I know. The silence this time was different, warmer somehow. Or maybe that was the approaching morning, that blue light beginning to come through the windows, the building around him shifting into its daytime self. Mr. Ward, Olivia Hart said, will you be here tonight? Working tonight? I'll be here, he said. I'm always here. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. Something underneath the precision. Something she wasn't quite sure she wanted him to hear. Good, she said. That's good to know. The line went quiet. Ethan put his phone in his pocket, picked up his jacket and walked out into the morning, into the particular golden rose of a sunrise over a city waking up, and he thought she's going to be all right. He thought that about Grace, who was about to wake up and ask for pancakes. He thought that surprising himself about Olivia Hart. He thought that without examining it too closely about himself. He got in his car, drove home, made the pancakes, and for the first time in 2 years, he wasn't entirely sure what was going to happen next. That feeling, unfamiliar, almost forgotten, was not as terrible as he'd expected. She was still in the hospital 3 days later. That wasn't the plan. The plan, Olivia Hart's plan, the one she'd communicated very clearly to her assistant Marcus at 7 in the morning on the first day, while still connected to 2 IVs and a cardiac monitor, was that she would be discharged within 48 hours, transferred to her penthouse apartment with whatever home nursing arrangement was necessary, and back in a limited capacity at Hart Industries by the end of the week. She had a board meeting on Thursday. She had a call with the Singapore office on Friday. She had a life that did not pause for car accidents, and she was not willing to renegotiate that position simply because her body had temporarily decided otherwise. Dr. Reyes had listened to all of this with the particular patience of a woman who had heard similar speeches before, and then she had said calmly and without apology, Ms. Hart, you had a hemothorax. We drained approximately 400 milliliters of blood from your chest cavity. You are not going home in 48 hours. Olivia had looked at her for a long moment. 72 hours, she said. We'll see, said Dr. Reyes. The 72 hours came and went. Olivia stayed. She didn't like it. She didn't pretend to like it. Her room, a private suite on the 4th floor that Hart Industries' donor status entitled her to, became within 24 hours a secondary operations center for her company. Marcus arrived each morning with a laptop, a portfolio of documents requiring signature, and the expression of a man who was managing his anxiety through productivity. 3 different executives called daily. Her PR team sent drafts. Her lawyer sent contracts. And underneath all of it, quiet and persistent as a splinter, was the fact that Olivia Hart could not walk to her own window without assistance. She'd been in the wheelchair for 6 years. She knew people forgot about, that she worked very hard to make them forget, because the moment they remembered, their faces changed. The particular softening. The slight recalibration of expectation. The invisible demotion that happened behind people's eyes when they looked at her and saw the chair instead of her. She'd spent 6 years building a professional reputation that was, by any measure, formidable enough to override what people saw when she entered a room, and she was relentless about maintaining it. In a hospital, you couldn't maintain it. In a hospital, you were a body in a bed, and everyone who came through the door was there specifically to manage what your body was or wasn't doing. There was nowhere to put the armor. No way to wheel herself into a room and command it because she was the one in the bed. The chair was folded against the wall, and she was the one connected to the machines, and every single person who came in knew it. She hated it with a quiet, specific ferocity that she told no one about. Marcus, to his credit, had worked for her long enough to know that the way to help Olivia Hart in an uncomfortable situation was not to acknowledge the discomfort. He kept the work coming. She kept working. It was their unspoken agreement, and it served them both. On the second night, around 9 o'clock, there was a knock at her door. She was expecting Marcus with the Singapore call brief. "Come in," she said, not looking up from her laptop. The door opened. The footsteps were different, quieter, less hurried. She looked up. Ethan Ward was standing in the doorway in his security uniform, a paper cup of coffee in each hand, with the particular expression of a man who has just realized he may have made a miscalculation. "I thought," he started. "The day nurse said you were still awake. I thought—" He stopped. "I can go." Olivia looked at him, then at the 2 cups. "Is one of those for me?" she asked. "It's hospital cafeteria coffee," he said. "It's not. Is one of them for me?" A beat. "Yes." "Then come in." He came in. He set one of the cups on her bedside table, kept the other, and stood there with the particular posture of a man who had not sat down, uninvited, in a very long time. "Sit down, Mr. Ward," she said. "You're making me anxious." He pulled the visitor's chair a few feet from the bed and sat. He looked tired, not in the collapsed, helpless way of exhaustion, but in the quiet, load-bearing way of someone who had been carrying weight for a long time and had gotten very good at making it look ordinary. "How's the pain?" he asked. "Manageable." She picked up the coffee. It was as advertised, terrible. She drank it anyway. "How's your daughter?" Something in his face changed. Not much, just a slight easing, like a door opening an inch. "She's good. She asked me today why hospitals smell the way they do." "What did you tell her?" "I told her it's because hospitals are places where people work very hard, and places where people work very hard develop a particular smell." He paused. She said that sounded like a non-answer. "She's right." "I know." He almost smiled. "She's 6. She's already better at calling things out than most adults I know." Olivia looked at him over the rim of the paper cup. "Does she know where you work?" "She knows I work at a hospital at night." "Does she know what you did the other night?" The question landed differently than she'd intended. She could see that in the slight shift of his posture, not defensive, but careful. "She doesn't need to know that," he said. "She has a father who saved someone's life. That seems like something a child might want to know about the man raising her." "She has a father who works nights and makes pancakes in the morning," Ethan said. "That's what she needs to know. The rest is—" He stopped, choosing the word carefully. "The rest is mine." Olivia was quiet for a moment. She understood that, actually. The parts of yourself you kept separate, that you didn't let the world touch, because the world had a way of handling things carelessly, and those particular things couldn't afford to be handled carelessly. "You came by last night too," she said. "The nurse mentioned it. You didn't come in. You were asleep. You could have left the coffee. Cold coffee is worse than no coffee." "That's debatable." She set the cup down. "Why do you come by Mr. Ward?" He looked at her steadily. "I like to check in on patients that I've had a hand in." "That's not quite the truth." "No," he admitted. "But it's part of it." She waited. He was quiet for a long moment, looking at the cup in his hands, and she had the sense that he was deciding something, working through an internal argument that he had not invited her to witness, but that was happening anyway, right there in the visitor's chair. "You reminded me of someone," he finally said. "That first night. Not in the way you look or anything like that, just the way you were fighting, the way you refused to let go." He looked up. "I've seen a lot of people in a lot of bad situations. Some people, when it gets really bad, they start to disappear inside it. They just go somewhere else. And some people fight right up to the last second like they're angry at the very idea of losing." He paused. "You were the second kind. Even half-conscious, you were the second kind." Olivia said nothing. "Sarah was like that too," he said. "My wife." His voice was level, but she heard what was underneath it. "She fought like hell at the end, more than anyone knew." He stopped. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize," she said. And then more quietly, "Tell me about her." He looked at her like she'd said something unexpected, like it was the last thing he'd anticipated. "You don't have to," she added. "No, He stopped again. She watched him navigate something internal, something that clearly didn't get navigated very often. "She was a teacher," he said. "Third grade. She loved it in a way it was almost embarrassing how much she loved it. She used to come home and tell me about her students, and I'd think this woman genuinely cares which kid got a part in the school play. It wasn't performance. She actually cared." A pause. "She was the opposite of everything I was trained to be. I was trained to assess, detach, act, move on. She assessed, and then she just stayed. In everything. Every hard thing, she just stayed." "And you loved that about her," Olivia said. Not a question. "More than anything," he said simply. The room was quiet for a moment. "What happened?" Olivia asked. She asked it gently, but she asked it directly because she could tell he was someone who respected directness more than he respected delicacy. He told her. Brief, clean, the way he told it when he had to. The aneurysm, the school, the cereal aisle, the phone call. Olivia listened without moving. Without offering the sounds and phrases that people usually offered, the "oh no's" and "I'm so sorry's" that, however genuine, had a way of pushing the teller out of their own story. When he finished, she said, "And then you became a security guard." "And then I became a security guard. People thought that was a waste. People had opinions. What did you think?" He considered this with the seriousness of someone who had in fact thought about it. "I thought that I had a 4-year-old girl who needed someone present, and that I had enough left in me to do one thing well, and that the one thing was going to be her." He paused. "I still think that." "You could have done more," she said, not as a judgment, as a statement of fact. "You're clearly capable of more." Capable and willing aren't the same thing. She looked at him for a long moment. "No," she agreed. "They're not." There was something in the way she said it that made him look at her differently. He'd told her enough about himself. He understood without having to be told that there was something on the other side of that statement. "The wheelchair," he said. It wasn't a question either. She met his eyes. 6 years ago. Spinal injury. I was 38, I'd just been named CEO, and I went for a morning run on the trail behind my house and made a wrong step on a wet surface. She said it precisely the way she always said it, quick, factual, nothing to grab onto. 3 surgeries, 18 months of aggressive rehabilitation, partial mobility. Some good days, more good days than doctors initially predicted, but the chair is part of the permanent picture. And you built Hart Industries from that chair. I built the last half of it from that chair, yes. That's... He seemed to search for the word. Don't, she said. I was going to say remarkable. I know what you were going to say. Don't. Her voice was even but firm. I don't want that word. It has a way of meaning remarkable considering. And the considering is the part I can't stand. He nodded slowly. All right, he said. I won't say it. Thank you. Can I say something else? She gestured briefly with her free hand. Go ahead. The way you said that, the trail. The wrong step. The surgeries, you've said that a lot, haven't you? That exact version. Olivia looked at him. What makes you say that? Because there's no feeling left in it. When people have rehearsed something, the feeling goes out of it, like a word you've said too many times. He paused. You've told that story so many times you killed it. She was silent for a moment, several moments. Occupational habit, she said finally. When you're in a position like mine, people ask. They always ask. You have a choice. You can let them have the real answer, and they'll use it to build a narrative about you. Or you can give them the clean version, and they file it and move on. And the real answer. She looked at him for a long time. The machines beeped softly. Somewhere in the hallway, a cart rolled by. I was devastated, she said. The word came out differently from the rest, unpolished, real. I was completely devastated. I had worked for 20 years to get where I was, and I fell apart. For about 3 months, I fell completely apart. I didn't think I could. I didn't know how to be who I'd built myself to be in a body that had changed the rules. What changed? He asked, quietly. I got angry enough, she said. I got angry enough that the devastation didn't have room anymore, and angry was something I knew how to use. You weaponized it. I weaponized it. Yes. A pause. It worked. It kept working for a long time. Until the car accident. She let out a breath. Until the car accident. She looked at the window. I was on my way back from a late dinner with an investor. My driver had taken the evening off. I was driving myself, which I do sometimes when I want to think. A driver ran a red light at full speed. She stopped. I saw it coming. I had about 2 seconds. I thought, this is very strange. I thought about the board meeting on Thursday. Not your life. Not my life. The board meeting. She paused. I've thought about that a lot since. What that says about me. What do you think it says? She was quiet. That I've been living like the work was the life, and the actual life was administrative, something to manage around the work. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He turned the paper cup slowly in his hands, thinking. I did that too, he said finally. After Sarah. Not work, but the routine, the shift, the rounds, the breakfast, the school run. I made the structure the thing, so I didn't have to figure out what the thing was supposed to be. Is it working? She asked. Still. He didn't answer right away. It's keeping us standing, he said. Me and Grace, we're standing. A pause. Some days that feels like enough. Some days it doesn't. Olivia looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite name. It wasn't pity. She'd already established she wasn't built for pity, and he appreciated that. It was more like recognition. The particular recognition of one person who has built a survivable life out of the wreckage of a previous one, seeing another person doing exactly the same thing. Ethan, she said. It was the first time she'd used his first name. She seemed to notice it too. She didn't take it back. Can I ask you something without you deflecting? You can ask. What do you want? Not for Grace. For yourself. The question sat in the room. He looked at her. She looked back at him, steady and direct, with no indication that she was going to let him off the hook with a half answer. I want to stop bracing, he said at last. I've been braced since the cereal aisle, waiting for the next thing. I want to stop waiting for the next thing. She held his gaze. Then she nodded once. That's honest, she said. You asked for honest. I did. She picked up the coffee again, looked at it, set it back down. People don't usually give it to me. They give me managed versions of honest. Boardroom honest. Press release honest. I spent 12 years in situations where managed versions of honest got people killed, Ethan said. Habit died hard. She almost smiled at that. Almost. "I think I might be very glad you were working tonight," she said. "3 nights ago. I think I might be very glad." "I'm usually working," he said. "I'm always here." He'd said those words to her before the night of the accident over the phone. She remembered. He could tell by the way she looked at him that she remembered. He stood up. "It's late," he said. "You should sleep." "You keep telling me that. You keep not doing it. I'm the CEO of a—" "You had 400 milliliters of blood drained from your chest 48 hours ago," he said. "You're a human being who needs sleep. Whatever you're CEO of can wait until morning." She stared at him. He got the impression that very few people in her life told her what to do in that tone flat, certain, entirely unbothered by who she was, and that she didn't know entirely how to process it. "You're bossy," she said. "My daughter says the same thing." "Your daughter seems very perceptive." "Good night, Ms. Hart." He picked up both empty cups, dropped them in the trash on his way out, and pulled the door quietly closed behind him. Olivia sat in the dark for a long time, the monitors beeping softly, the city somewhere outside the window going about its complicated business. She thought about what he'd said. "I want to stop bracing." She thought about the board meeting on Thursday, about the Singapore call Friday, about the 43 unread emails in her phone that she'd been ignoring for the past 2 hours. She thought about a man who walked hospital hallways all night so he could be home in time for breakfast with his 6-year-old. She thought for perhaps the first time in 6 years, perhaps the first time in longer than that, about what she actually wanted. Not what Hart Industries needed. Not what the board expected. Not what her reputation required. What she wanted. Olivia Hart. The woman who'd fallen apart in private for 3 months and then gotten angry enough to build something remarkable from the rubble. She didn't have an answer. That might have been the most honest thing that had happened to her in a very long time. She closed the laptop. She turned off the bedside light. In the darkness, quiet and unexpectedly, she slept. On the 3rd day, she had a visitor she hadn't invited. His name was Richard Kale, and he was Hart Industries' COO 45, silver-haired with the precise grooming and careful friendliness of a man who had spent his entire career managing up. He arrived at 11 in the morning with flowers she didn't want and a leather portfolio that meant he wanted to talk about the Thursday board meeting. She let him talk for 20 minutes. He was good at it, smooth prepared with that particular executive skill of making his agenda sound like it was actually your agenda. Then he said, "We've been looking into the incident, the accident report. Our legal team has some concerns about liability exposure, and separately there's been a small amount of media interest in the circumstances of your admission. Specifically, there's some question about the conduct of a hospital employee who may have provided medical services outside his scope. Our team thinks it's best if we get ahead of that narrative." Olivia looked at him. "Say that again." He shifted slightly. She'd seen that shift before. It was the shift of a man who had expected a different response. "There are potential liability questions around—" "You're talking about the man who stabilized my blood pressure." "I'm talking about a security guard who performed medical procedures without—" "Go back to the office, Richard." "Olivia, I'm not asking." Her voice had gone to a place it sometimes went, a place that people who worked for her recognized as the place where negotiation ended. "Go back to the office. Cancel whatever you had planned for the board meeting slot on Thursday. I'll call in. And tell your legal team, my legal team, that if I hear anything resembling a threat toward Ethan Ward, I will be the last person standing between them and consequences they have not budgeted for. Are we clear?" Richard Kale looked at her for a moment. Then he picked up his portfolio, left the flowers on the chair, and left. Olivia sat in the aftermath of that conversation and felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Rage. Clean, uncomplicated rage, which was different from the rage she usually operated on, that cold, slow-burning fuel of ambition and pride. This was something else. This was the kind of rage that came from a specific place. From loyalty. From the stubborn human instinct to protect someone who hadn't asked to be protected. She hadn't felt it in a long time. It required caring about someone specifically, and she'd become very efficient about not doing that. She picked up her phone and called Marcus. "I need everything you can find on Ethan Ward," she said. "Former Army, combat medic, Silver Star, Columbus, Ohio before here. I want his service record if it's accessible through public information. I want to know where he's from, and I want to know if there's anything Hart Industries can do that would genuinely help him." She paused. And Marcus quietly, "He doesn't need to know I'm asking." "Understood," Marcus said. "Anything else?" "Yes. Get Richard Cale off the Thursday call." She hung up. She turned toward the window. The afternoon light was coming in at an angle, and somewhere on the street below, she could hear the ordinary sound of a city in the middle of its day horn's footsteps, the brief fragment of someone's music as they passed. She thought about what Ethan had said on the phone 3 nights ago, the last thing before he'd hung up. "I'm always here." She'd spent 6 years building walls with her bare hands and calling them leadership. She'd called the coldness efficiency. She'd called the distance professionalism. She'd made herself a version of herself that couldn't be diminished because she didn't let anyone close enough to try. And somehow, in a trauma bay at 2:47 in the morning, a tired man in a security uniform had walked right through all of it without even trying. She didn't know yet what to do with that. But for the first time in a long time, she thought there might be something worth figuring out. Marcus delivered the file on a Thursday morning 3 days after Olivia had asked for it. It wasn't thick. Ethan Ward was not a man who generated a large paper trail, which was itself, she was beginning to understand, a kind of statement. People who wanted to be found left traces. People who had decided for reasons of their own that being found wasn't the point, they moved through the world quietly, and you had to look carefully to see where they'd been. She read it twice. Then she set it on the bedside table and looked at the ceiling for a while. The Silver Star citation was public record, and Marcus had included the full text. She'd known the medal existed, she'd mentioned it to Ethan on the phone, but knowing a thing and reading the specific language of it were different experiences entirely. The citation described in the careful, restrained language of military commendation an engagement in Kunar Province in 2014 in which Specialist Ethan Ward had, under direct enemy fire, treated and evacuated 4 critically wounded soldiers over a period of approximately 40 minutes, twice leaving covered position to reach men who could not reach him. 2 of those men, the citation noted, would not have survived without his intervention. She read that part 3 times. She thought about the man who had stood in her trauma bay and said quietly and without any apparent need for acknowledgement, "I didn't do anything I wouldn't have done for anyone who came through those doors." She thought about how long it must take a person to mean something like that, to say it not as humility, but as simple fact. Marcus had also included, without being asked, a brief note at the bottom of the file. His daughter's school participates in the city's after-school enrichment lottery. Grace Ward has been on the wait list for the STEM program for 14 months. Capacity issue. The program is underfunded. Olivia read that once. She picked up her phone. She put it down. She picked it up again. She did not call Marcus. She sat with the information for a full day before she did anything with it, which was unusual for her. Olivia Hart was not by nature or by practice a person who sat with things. She assessed and acted. She had built an entire professional identity on the speed and precision of that sequence. But something about Ethan Ward made her want to be careful. She didn't examine why. She just knew that careless action in this direction would be wrong, and wrong in a way she wouldn't be able to undo. She was still thinking about it on Thursday evening when he knocked. "Come in," she said. He looked different tonight. Still in the uniform, still carrying coffee. She'd noticed this had become a pattern, and she'd stopped pretending it wasn't something she looked forward to, but there was something in his posture that was slightly off from his usual. Not troubled exactly. Tired in a different way. "Sit down," she said before he could offer her the cup and make the offer into a transaction instead of what it actually was. He sat. He handed her the coffee. He looked at her with the particular directness that she had come to understand was simply how he looked at things. No performance in it, no angle, just attention. "Grace had a hard day," he said. Unprompted, which meant it was sitting on him enough that it came out on its own. "What happened?" "There's a girl in her class, Mia. They've been best friends since the start of the year." He turned his cup slowly. "Mia told Grace today that her mom said she couldn't come to Grace's birthday party." Olivia waited. Grace asked her why. Mia said her mom said she felt bad that Grace didn't have a mom to plan the party, and she didn't want Mia to make it worse by pointing it out. Olivia was quiet for a moment. "That's terrible." "Yeah." His jaw moved. "Yeah, it is." "What did Grace say?" "She told Mia that she did have someone to plan the party. That her dad was planning it." A pause. "Then she came home and told me I needed to plan a party." Despite herself, despite the weight of what he'd just described, Olivia felt something pull at the corner of her mouth. "What did you say?" "I said I'd already been planning it." He looked at her. "I hadn't." "But you said it." "She needed me to say it." Olivia nodded slowly. She understood that the specific calculus of it, what a person needed versus what was strictly true, and the moments when the former had to take precedence. "She cried," he said, "after dinner. She thought I didn't hear, but I heard. She's got this thing she does where she runs the faucet so the sound covers it." "She learned that from someone," Olivia said quietly. He looked at her. He didn't deny it. "Ethan." She used his name with intention now, not by accident. "She's 6. She's allowed to cry audibly." "I know that." "Do you tell her that He stopped. "I tell her it's okay to feel sad." "And then you run the faucet." He was quiet for a long moment. "I don't want her to think—" He stopped again. Started differently. "She watches me. She's been watching me since Sarah died. I can feel it. She's 6 years old and she's trying to figure out if we're okay by looking at me. If I fall apart—" "You're allowed to fall apart," Olivia said. Her voice was even. "She's watching you to understand what the world is like. If the world is a place where people fall apart sometimes and then put themselves back together, she needs to know that. That's not weakness, that's the actual information." He looked at the cup in his hands. "You can't protect her from grief by modeling that grief is something you run the faucet over," she said. "She already knows it isn't. She's 6 and she already knows." The room was quiet. He sat with what she'd said in the way he sat with things genuinely without defensiveness, turning it over. "When did you get this smart about it?" he asked. "I'm not smart about it. I made every available mistake in the other direction." She paused. "I protected myself from grief by working, by building, by being so relentlessly capable that grief couldn't find a surface to stick to." She looked at him. "And then I had 400 milliliters of blood drained from my chest at 3 in the morning, and I lay in a hospital bed and couldn't work, and it found every surface." He was quiet. "The avoidance is not the solution," she said. "I'm still figuring out what the solution is. But I'm fairly certain the avoidance is not it." He nodded slowly. "She asked me about Sarah last night," he said. "She does that sometimes. She asks me something specific last night. She wanted to know what Sarah's favorite color was." "What did you tell her?" "Yellow," which was true. Sarah had a whole yellow phase. Half our kitchen was yellow for a while. He almost smiled, and it was the most unguarded she'd ever seen his face. "I told her that. And then she asked if she could paint her room yellow, and I said yes without thinking, and now apparently we're painting her room yellow on Saturday." "That's a good thing," Olivia said. "Yeah." The smile settled quiet and real on his face. "Yeah, it is." She watched him, and thought about the file on her bedside table, about the STEM program, about the 14-month waitlist. She'd spent another full day deciding how to do this, and she'd landed on a position, but she was still working out the words. I want to tell you something, she said, and I want you to hear the whole thing before you say no. He looked at her. The smile was gone, replaced with something careful. He'd recognized the setup. He was smart enough to recognize the setup. I had someone pull your service record, she said. Public information. I want to be clear about that. And I found out that Grace is on a wait list for the city's STEM after-school program. He went very still. I'm not trying to, she started. You had someone pull my record. Yes. She didn't apologize for it. He respected directness. She was going to give him directness. I wanted to understand who you are, not as a calculation, because I wanted to know. He held her gaze. His expression was difficult to read, not angry, but not comfortable either. Processing. The STEM program, she said, continuing carefully, is underfunded. That's why the waitlist exists. Hart Industries has an education foundation, the Hart Foundation. We fund programs like this across the city. I want to increase the funding specifically to that program, which would expand the capacity and eliminate the waitlist. For Grace, he said. For every child on the waitlist. Grace included. She paused. I was going to do it regardless of whether you ever came back to this room. The program deserves the funding. I should have been paying more attention to it already. But yes, I'm telling you because Grace is on that list and I think you deserve to know. He was quiet for a long time. Ethan, she said, I'm not trying to buy you something. I'm not trying to compensate. I'm telling you because it's true and you should know it. That's all. You could have not told me, he said. You could have done it, and I never would have known. I could have, she agreed. But that felt dishonest. And I told you before I don't like dishonesty. Something shifted in him. She could see it the way the careful stillness rearranged itself into something more open. The Silver Star citation, he said. It wasn't a question. He was confirming that she'd read it. Yes. He looked at the window. Those 4 men have families, kids. 2 of them have grandkids now. I get Christmas cards. He paused. People treat that citation like it's about me. Like I did something singular. But I was just the guy with the kit who happened to be in the right place. Any of the men on my team would have done the same. The citation says you left covered position twice under direct fire, Olivia said quietly. I don't believe every man on your team would have done that. You didn't know my team. No, but I know people, and I know the difference between people who have the capacity for something and people who actually do it when the moment is real and the cost is real. He looked at her. You did it, she said. That matters. Stop giving it away. It landed. She could see it land. My CO said something similar, he said after a moment. When they gave it to me. He said I had a bad habit of distributing credit until there was none left for myself. He was right. I thought he was wrong at the time. And now, he was quiet. Now I think maybe the habit is useful in the field, and less useful everywhere else. Yes, she said. That's exactly right. He turned the cup in his hands. She'd noticed he did this when he was thinking through something, not a nervous gesture, just a physical anchor. You read the citation, he said. The whole thing. Yes. And then you called the school foundation. And then I called the foundation. He looked at her. What are you doing, Ms. Hart? It was the first time since the early days that he'd gone back to the formal address. She understood what it meant. The question was serious, and he was asking her to match that seriousness. Olivia, she said. You've been calling me Olivia for 2 days now. Olivia, he said. What are you doing? She held his gaze. I'm trying, she said, to figure out how to be a different person than I've been. and I seem to be working that out in the presence of someone who is already very good at being a specific kind of person that I have not previously understood how to value." He stared at her. "That's the most honest answer I have," she said. "Take it or leave it." He was quiet for a long time. Then, "That's a lot to put on a hospital security guard." "You're a lot more than a hospital security guard. You know that." "I'm also exactly a hospital security guard. I'm both things. I've made peace with that." "I know," she said. "That's actually the part I'm trying to learn." He looked at her with an expression she was learning to read, the particular expression he got when something she said surprised him. Not startled. Surprised in the quieter, more specific way of someone who hadn't expected to find something in a particular place and found it anyway. "Grace's birthday," she said. "When is it?" He looked cautious. "Olivia. I'm not going to send a pony or rent out a stadium. I just want to know when it is." A pause. 2 weeks from Saturday." "How old?" 7. "What does she want?" He almost smiled. "A telescope. She wants to look at stars." Olivia looked at him. Something caught in her chest. Not pain. Something adjacent to pain. Something that was actually closer to tenderness, which she hadn't felt in a very long time, and which she recognized with the slight shock of a person discovering a room in their house they'd forgotten existed. "She wants to look at stars," she said. "She's been asking for 3 months. I've been pricing them out. There are some decent ones in the $100 range that would—" "Let me find her one," Olivia said. "Olivia. A good one, not excessive. Something that a child can actually use herself without adult help that will last her." She paused. "I know people who know optics. I'll make a call." He was looking at her the way people looked at her in board meetings when she made a decision and they hadn't yet decided whether to push back, weighing it. "She doesn't know who you are," he said. "She doesn't need to know where it came from." "She'll ask?" "Tell her a friend." "Are we friends?" he asked. Directly, simply, with no play in it. She looked at him. "I don't have many of those," she said. "I've been told I'm difficult." "You're not difficult," he said. "You're precise. There's a difference. Most people don't see the difference. Most people aren't paying close enough attention." She let that sit for a moment. Let herself feel it, which was itself an exercise she was out of practice with. "Yes," she said. "I think we're friends." He nodded. "Once." "Then yes. You can find her a telescope." "Good." He stood up. He picked up the empty cups. He was almost at the door when she said, "Ethan." He turned. "What you said to me. The night of the accident, in the trauma bay." She paused, finding the words. "You said I was going to see the sunrise." "I remember." "How did you know? In that moment, how did you know to say that?" He considered it. "I didn't know," he said. "I never know. But I've found that when someone is right at the edge, what they need most isn't information. It's a reason to hold on until the next thing." He looked at her steadily. "The sunrise is always the next thing, something concrete, something you can get to." She was quiet. "You held on," he said simply. "You got there." He pulled the door open. "Good night, Olivia." The door closed. She sat in the quiet of the room and thought about sunrises, about next things, about the specific quality of grace it took to offer a reason to someone who was running out of them. She thought about Ethan Ward, who had given away credit and kept nothing for himself for so long that he'd almost forgotten his own weight in the world. She was not going to let that stand. She didn't know yet exactly what that meant in practice. She knew it would have to be careful. He was not a man who could be helped loudly, who would accept the kind of broad sweeping gesture that her resources made easy. He'd push back on anything that felt like charity, on anything that felt like pity, on anything that made him into a project instead of a person. She had to think about it the way she thought about the hardest problems in her professional life. Not as a transaction, but as a relationship. What does this person actually need, and how can I be useful to that need without making him feel small in the process? She picked up her phone. She put it down. She looked at the window. The city outside was doing what cities do at night. Glowing, moving, entirely indifferent to the particular small dramas of individual humans. And she thought about a 6-year-old girl who ran the faucet over her crying and wanted to look at stars, and a man who'd been bracing for 2 years against the weight of everything that had happened. She thought about what it would mean to stop bracing. Not for Ethan, that wasn't hers to decide, but for herself. She'd said it in this room, said it out loud to another person, for the first time. The avoidance is not the solution. She meant it. She picked up her phone again. This time, she didn't put it down. She found the contact for her personal foundation director, checked the time, decided it was late, but not unreasonably late for someone on her payroll who had agreed to a certain level of availability, and called. "Elena," she said when it picked up. "I need you to pull the full funding breakdown for the city's after-school enrichment lottery. Specifically the STEM cohort. I want to know what it would take to eliminate the current waitlist entirely and build in enough capacity that no child who qualifies waits more than 30 days. A pause. "Yes, tonight is fine. I'll need it by tomorrow morning." Another pause. "Thank you. And Elena, this one isn't going in the press release." She hung up. She turned the phone over in her hand, looking at nothing. She thought about a man who had spent 12 years running toward danger and 2 years running from nothing, just standing still, because standing still was what his daughter needed. She thought about what it would mean to give him something to run toward again, not by pulling strings, not by making it easy, just by seeing him, actually seeing him, and not letting him get away with being invisible. That was something she could do. She was very good when she chose to be at refusing to let people disappear. She closed her eyes. For the second night in a row, she slept without the laptop open. It occurred to her distantly as she fell asleep that this was what it felt like to be a person instead of a position. She hadn't known she missed it. On Friday morning, Dr. Reyes came in at 8 o'clock, reviewed the overnight readings pressed carefully on Olivia's right side in 2 places, and said, "You can go home Sunday." Olivia said Saturday. Dr. Reyes looked at her. "Sunday, Ms. Hart, and I want a home nurse for the first week." "I'll arrange it. I'll believe it when I see the confirmation." Olivia almost smiled. She liked Dr. Reyes for the same reason she liked Ethan. They both said true things without apology, and they were both completely unbothered by who she was. "Dr. Reyes," she said as the doctor was turning to go. "The security guard Ethan Ward. He's on nights." Dr. Reyes turned back. Her expression was measured. "Yes." "The incident report. I want to make sure it reflects accurately what he did." "It does." "And the hospital administration, there's been no action taken, no review of his conduct." Something moved in Dr. Reyes's expression. "Careful. There were some preliminary questions raised by an outside party," she said. "I addressed them." "How?" "I told the chief of staff that the man's intervention was medically appropriate, technically competent, and almost certainly the reason you were stable enough for my team to work with when we arrived." She paused. "I also told him that if any action was taken against Mr. Ward, I would make my position on that very publicly known." Olivia looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me," Dr. Reyes said briskly. "I did it because it was correct. Get some sleep. I'll see you tomorrow." She left. Olivia sat in the morning light of the 4th-floor suite and thought about all the people in Ethan Ward's orbit who were without coordination, without even being aware of each other, quietly making sure he was all right. The EMTs who'd pointed at him. Dr. Reyes, who'd put his name in the incident report. The army that had given him a silver star. His mother, who drove 20 minutes in the middle of the night so his daughter could sleep in her own bed. He didn't know any of them were doing it. That was, she was increasingly certain, the most important thing about him. He had spent so long being the person who looked out for others, that it had never quite occurred to him that someone might be looking out for him. She was going to make sure he knew. Not loudly, not in a way that would make him uncomfortable, that would violate the particular careful balance of who he was. Just enough. Just clearly enough that he couldn't miss it. She picked up her phone and called Marcus. "The Thursday board meeting notes," she said. "I need to add one item to the agenda. New business. I'll send you the language." A pause. "And Marcus, find me a good telescope. For a 7-year-old who wants to look at stars. Nothing excessive. Something she can use herself." She paused again. "Yes, I know what day it is. Just find it." She hung up. She looked at the ceiling. She thought, "You're going to see the sunrise." She was. She already had. Olivia went home on Sunday. Not Saturday. Dr. Reyes had been unmoved on that point, and Olivia had conceded with the particular grace of someone who was losing the argument and knew it. The home nurse arranged by Marcus was a quiet, competent woman named Patricia, who had worked private care for 30 years, and who within 45 minutes of arriving at the penthouse had figured out exactly how much help Olivia was willing to accept and calibrated herself accordingly. Olivia liked her immediately. What she did not like was the silence. The penthouse was not by any objective measure a silent place. The city was 40 floors below, and its noise was constant, the particular low roar of a living thing that never quite stopped. But the apartment itself was very large and very clean, and arranged with the specific precision of a space that had been designed for effect, rather than for living. Everything in it was intentional. Nothing in it was accidental. There were no yellow kitchens. There were no stuffed rabbits with names. There were no children's drawings on the refrigerator or cold cups of coffee left on ledges, or any of the 10,000 small pieces of evidence that a life was actually being lived inside these walls. She stood at the window on her first evening home. The city spread below her, and understood something she had not understood before. She had built this place to be impressive. She had succeeded completely. And the thing it was most impressive at, she now understood, was being empty. She picked up her phone. She put it down. She walked away from the window and asked Patricia to make tea and sat on the couch, not the chair behind her desk, the couch, and did something she hadn't done in recent memory. She sat without working. It was harder than she expected. The impulse to reach for the phone, the laptop, the portfolio. The impulse was automatic, almost physical. Like the pull of a habit so deeply grooved, it had become indistinguishable from instinct. She sat with the impulse and didn't follow it. Patricia brought the tea. The city roared 40 floors down. She thought about a 6-year-old girl who ran the faucet over her crying because she'd learned that from her father. She thought, that's going to change. She didn't know exactly how yet, but she was working on it. She called Ethan the next morning. He answered on the second ring, which meant he was awake, which meant it was after 6 and Grace was up. She could hear in the background the specific sound of a morning in a small house, something on the stove, a child's voice asking a question, the ordinary percussion of a family starting its day. "How's the chest?" he asked. No preamble, just the question. "Better than yesterday," she said. "Patricia says the drainage is clearing." "Good. You should be sleeping more than you are." "I slept 8 hours." "That's a lie." She almost smiled. 6.5. Which is more than I've slept in years, so by my metric, it's significant progress. By your metric is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Ethan. She paused because she'd called for a reason, and she wasn't sure how to begin it, which was unusual for her. She was almost always sure how to begin things. "I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it without the deflection." A brief pause. "All right." "How are you?" Not Grace, not the job. You. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that she knew he was genuinely sitting with the question rather than reaching for the automatic answer. "Tired," he said. "The real kind, not the shift kind." "I know the difference," she said. "I've been both." "Yeah." Another pause. I had a moment last night. After Grace went to bed, I sat in the kitchen and I tried to just sit, without doing anything, without planning the next thing. How did it go? About 45 seconds before I got up and cleaned the counter. She laughed. It surprised both of them, not a polished social laugh, but the real kind, the kind that comes out before you've made a decision about it. "What?" he said, and she could hear in his voice that he was smiling. "Nothing," she said. "I did the same thing last night except with a briefing folder instead of a counter. We're both terrible at sitting still." "Grace told me this morning I have resting busy face," he said. "She's 7 in 2 weeks, 12 days. The telescope arrived yesterday," she said. "Marcus had it sent directly. I want you to look at it before she does. Make sure it's right." "Olivia, it's not excessive. I gave Marcus very specific parameters." A pause. "Where was it sent?" "To the hospital. I had it sent to the security station. I thought that was better than your home address." Another pause, shorter this time. "That was considerate," he said. "Thank you." "You can tell her it's from a friend," she said. "That's true." "It's true," he agreed. And then quietly, "She's going to lose her mind." "Good," Olivia said. "Children should lose their minds over things they love. It's healthy." She heard Grace's voice in the background, closer now, asking about something with the particular urgency that children applied to everything equally from genuine emergency to breakfast preferences. "Go," Olivia said. "Pancakes first." "How did you—" "You told me, first week. It's always pancakes." She heard him breathe. Not a sigh, something quieter. "I'll stop by Tuesday," he said. "Check on you." "I'll be fine." "I know you'll be fine. I'll stop by anyway." She held the phone for a moment after he hung up. Patricia appeared in the doorway with a look that said she'd heard enough to form an opinion and was far too professional to share it. "Breakfast, Ms. Hart," she said. "Yes," Olivia said. "And Patricia, do we have anything in this apartment that isn't kale or Greek yogurt?" Patricia's expression shifted precisely 1 degree toward what might have been amusement. "I took the liberty of doing a small shop yesterday," she said. "There are eggs." "Eggs?" Olivia said. "Good. Let's do something with that." She put the phone down and went to the kitchen. Not to the chair behind the desk. Not to the window. Not to the place in her life that she'd spent 6 years polishing into a monument to productive isolation. She went to the kitchen, and she sat at the counter while Patricia made eggs, and she let herself just be there. Present. In the room. Not managing anything or building anything or proving anything. Just a person in a kitchen waiting for breakfast. It was small. It was almost absurdly small. It was the best morning she'd had in 6 years. She didn't examine that too closely. She just let it be what it was. The board meeting happened on Tuesday by video. Olivia ran it from the desk in her home office, Patricia stationed just outside with tea she'd learned to bring without being asked. The board members appeared in their small rectangles on the screen, 12 people whose combined professional experience was formidable, and whose combined discomfort at seeing Olivia, from what was clearly a home setting, was visible in the slight unease each of them failed to fully hide. She ran the meeting in its usual sequence: financial review, operational update, Q4 projections, and then near the end said, one item of new business. She watched the rectangles shift. Richard Kale, in the upper right corner of her screen, had the expression of a man attempting to look neutral. "I want to restructure the Hart Foundation's education portfolio," she said. "Specifically, I want to triple the funding for the city's after-school enrichment programs. STEM cohort first, then expand across all tracks. The goal is full waitlist elimination within 18 months and a permanent capacity increase that keeps pace with demand." She paused. "Additionally, I want to establish a new initiative within the foundation, a Veterans Transition Support Program, focused on practical needs. Job placement support, mental health resources, Childcare assistance for single-parent veteran households. No bureaucracy, no lengthy application process. Accessible and fast. She looked at the screen. Questions. The rectangles were quiet for a moment. One of the board members, Catherine Moore, 62, who had known Olivia for 15 years and who had the advantage of not being afraid of her, leaned slightly toward her camera. This is a significant funding commitment, Olivia. The foundation is well-resourced, but this is beyond the scope of our current. I'll cover the difference from my personal endowment, Olivia said. The foundation takes the structure. The capital isn't the issue. Catherine looked at her for a moment. What is the issue? The issue, Olivia said carefully, is that I've been running a foundation that puts my name on buildings and makes the annual gala go well and does not in fact do enough of the actual work it was established to do. I'd like to fix that. Another silence. Richard Cale said carefully, "This is a notable shift in direction." "Yes," Olivia said. "It is." "What's prompting it?" She looked at his rectangle on the screen. She thought about what to say, and decided, as she had been deciding more frequently in the past week, to say the real thing. "I had 400 milliliters of blood drained from my chest," she said. "And the man who kept me stable until the medical team arrived was a decorated combat veteran working a night security shift because it was the schedule that let him be home for breakfast with his daughter." She paused. That felt like information I should do something with. The board meeting ended 20 minutes later with full approval on both initiatives. Richard Cale did not speak again after his question. Catherine Moore caught Olivia's eye just before she ended the call and gave her a look that contained, if Olivia was reading it correctly, something resembling approval. Olivia closed the laptop. She sat at her desk in the quiet of the home office and felt beneath the professional satisfaction of a meeting that had gone the way she'd intended something else. Something older. The particular feeling of having done a thing for the right reason instead of the strategic reason. She'd forgotten how different those felt. She'd spent so long making sure they were the same thing, making sure the right thing and the strategic thing aligned, that she'd forgotten they weren't always the same, and that when they weren't the right thing had its own specific weight. It was heavier, and much, much lighter, simultaneously. She hadn't known that was possible until she felt it. Ethan came Tuesday evening, as he'd said he would. He'd stopped at the hospital security station and picked up the box Marcus had sent. It was sitting in his car, still sealed, and he brought it up to the penthouse with the wariness of a man carrying something that represented a conversation he hadn't finished deciding how to feel about. Olivia let him in herself. Patricia had taken the afternoon off, and he stood in the entryway of the penthouse and looked at the space with the brief, involuntary assessment of a man who had a highly calibrated understanding of the relationship between environment and the person who lived in it. "It's very clean," he said. "I know," she said. "You don't cook in there." A statement, not a question. He was looking at the kitchen. "I'm learning," she said. "Patricia made eggs this morning. I supervised." "That's a start." He set the box on the counter. "I looked it up online before I came. The model. And it's good." He put his hand on the box, looked at it. "It's genuinely good, Olivia. She'll be able to see the rings of Saturn with this." Something warm moved through her. "Good," she said. "That's what I wanted." "She doesn't know what's happening for her birthday," he said. "I told her we're going somewhere, but I didn't say where." "My mother's coming, my neighbor Dave." He paused. "It's going to be a small thing." "Small things are usually the real things," she said. He looked at her. "You could come." The words landed without warning. She went still. "I don't mean it's not a formal invitation," he said quickly. "It's a birthday party for a 7-year-old in my backyard. It's going to involve juice boxes and someone getting frosting on something important. He stopped. "She knows about you. I didn't tell her much, but she knows you're the person from the hospital, that I've been checking on you." "What did she say?" Olivia asked. "She said, and I'm quoting directly, Is she nice? He paused. I told her yes. You could have said you weren't sure yet. I was sure, he said simply. She looked at him. She wanted to say yes. The immediacy of that want surprised her. She was not accustomed to wanting things immediately. She was accustomed to evaluating, calculating, deciding with the full weight of deliberation. But the word yes was right there, fully formed, before she'd done any of the math. I use a wheelchair, she said, not as an objection, as information. As the thing she said to people before they discovered it and recalibrated their faces. I know, he said. My backyard is flat. The porch has a ramp. Dave built it last year for when my mother visits. She has a bad knee. He held her gaze. I checked before I asked. She looked at him for a long moment. You checked before you asked, she said. I didn't want you to have to ask, he said. It seemed like a thing you wouldn't want to have to ask. She didn't trust herself to say anything immediately. She looked at the box on the counter, at his hand still resting on top of it, at the particular careful attention of a man who had made a habit of thinking without being asked about what the people around him needed. Yes, she said. I'll come. He nodded. It's at 11. I'll text you the address. All right. He was quiet for a moment, looking at the kitchen again. Have you eaten dinner? Patricia left something in the... That's not an answer. I was going to eat it. When? She looked at him. You're doing it again. Doing what? Being bossy. My daughter says it's a character flaw, he said, already opening her refrigerator with the straightforward ease of someone who had decided a thing was going to happen. She also says it comes from a good place, so she forgives it. You can have the same position. He looked inside. Patricia left you soup. I told you, and half a sandwich, and what appears to be approximately 8 containers of yogurt. He turned and looked at her. You were going to eat yogurt for dinner. The soup was for tomorrow. The soup is for now. Sit down, Olivia. She sat. Not because he'd told her to, she made that distinction very clearly in her own mind. Because she'd been standing for 40 minutes, and her right side was still tender, and sitting was factually the correct thing to do. She sat at the kitchen counter in the stool she'd discovered 3 days ago and had been using with increasing frequency, and watched him find the right burner without asking, and put the soup on with the efficiency of someone who had been doing this for other people his entire life. You don't have to do this, she said. I know. I'm not incapable. I know that too. Eat anyway. She was quiet for a moment. Ethan. The Veterans Program. He turned. What Veterans Program? She told him. Not everything. Not the full scope of what she'd moved at the board meeting, but enough. The foundation. The funding restructure. The new initiative. She watched his face as she explained it, that careful, contained face that she'd been learning to read over the past 10 days. He turned back to the stove, adjusted the heat, said nothing for a long moment. You're angry, she said. No. He said it without turning. Not angry. Then what? He turned then. He looked at her with an expression that was harder to name than the others, something layered in it, something with more than one thing happening at once. I don't want to be a project, he said. You're not a project. Olivia. The Veterans Initiative is going to serve hundreds of families. You are one of those families. That is not the same as being a project. She held his gaze. I didn't design a program around you. I looked at what existed, found where the gap was, and moved resources into the gap. That's what I do. The fact that the gap happened to become visible to me through knowing you doesn't make it charity, it makes it information. He was quiet. I would have found this gap eventually, she said. Probably not for another 3 years, and probably not this specifically. But eventually. She paused. You moved the timeline, that's all. He turned back to the soup, stirred it once. The kitchen was quiet. There are men I served with, he said. Good men. Who came back and couldn't find their footing. couldn't figure out how to translate what they'd done into something the civilian world understood. Some of them are fine now. Some of them... He stopped. Some of them aren't. I know, she said. A program like that, if it's done right, it could actually... He stopped again. She could see him working against the impulse to minimize it. It will do what it's designed to do, she said. If it's designed well, which is why I want your input on it, not as a recipient, as someone who knows what the actual needs are. He turned and looked at her. That's a very different thing, she said. You understand the difference. You want me to consult. I want you to help design it, she said. Not full-time, not immediately. But your experience is the most relevant possible expertise for what I'm trying to build, and I would be genuinely foolish to do this without you. He stood very still. She could see the argument happening inside him, the instinct to deflect, to minimize, to find a way to make himself smaller than the moment was asking him to be. I'm a security guard, he said. One last time. She recognized it for what it was, not a real objection. A habit reaching for the door one more time before it was finally willing to stop. You're a decorated combat medic, a single father, a man who has navigated every system that I'm trying to redesign from the outside, and you're the reason I'm alive, she said. Call yourself whatever you want. I know what you are. The soup began to steam. He turned off the burner. He found a bowl in the cabinet on the second try and poured it without being told where the bowls were, which meant he'd been paying attention when Patricia was moving around the kitchen, which was exactly the kind of thing he did without knowing he was doing it. He set the bowl in front of her. He sat down on the stool across the counter. I want to think about it, he said. That's all I'm asking. And it can't change things. This. He gestured briefly at the space between them. Whatever this is, it can't become something professional, something with a structure and a purpose. He paused. I need it to stay what it is. What is it? She asked. She asked it the way he'd asked her, are we friends, directly, simply without play. He looked at her across the counter. The city roared 40 floors below. Patricia's soup was good, she could tell from the smell, and the kitchen was warm, and there was a telescope in a box on the counter for a 7-year-old who wanted to look at stars. The truest conversation I've had in 2 years, he said. Maybe longer. She held that, felt the weight of it. Me too, she said. He nodded. Once. She picked up the spoon. She ate the soup. He stayed, not making conversation, not filling the silence, just there the way he was in the hospital room. The way she'd come to understand was simply how he existed in spaces where someone needed company more than words. She thought about what she'd said at the board meeting, about the man who kept her stable until help arrived. She hadn't used his name there, she'd protected that instinctively. But the board knew something had changed. Catherine Moore knew. Richard Cale knew, and it had made him uncomfortable, and she found she didn't care about his discomfort at all. Something had changed. She was not the same person she'd been 11 days ago, in a car, on the way back from a late dinner, thinking about a board meeting while a set of headlights came at her through a red light. She was someone who sat at her own kitchen counter and ate soup, while a friend, a real one, the kind that cost something, sat across from her in comfortable silence. She was someone who was learning slowly and imperfectly, and with significant resistance from lifelong habit, how to let the actual life be the main thing. She thought I should call my sister. The thought arrived without warning, and landed with the particular weight of a thought that has been waiting a long time to finally be thought. She had a sister. Her name was Joanna, and she lived in Portland, and they spoke on birthdays and holidays, and had for the past 8 years, since the injury, since Olivia had closed the distance between them, along with everything else that couldn't be managed. She should call her sister, not for a reason, not to update her or brief her or coordinate anything, just a call. She filed this away and kept eating. The party's at 11, Ethan said. Grace is going to be up by 6. Will she be able to sleep the night before? Absolutely not, he said. Last year she was at my bedside at 4:50 in the morning, asking if it was technically her birthday yet. What did you tell her? I told her yes, and that the birthday rule was she had to let her dad sleep until 6. He almost smiled. She negotiated me down to 5:30. She's definitely going to be a CEO, Olivia said. God help us all, he said. She laughed, the real kind again. It was becoming, she noticed, less surprising. She finished the soup. He took the bowl without asking and washed it at the sink, rinsed it twice the way someone did when washing dishes was automatic enough to be thorough without being thought about. Go to sleep at a reasonable hour, he said, putting the bowl in the drying rack. You can't tell me what to do, Ethan. You just had 400 milliliters of, if you finish that sentence, I'm rescinding the party invitation. He turned and looked at her. His expression was perfectly serious. You can't rescind it. It's Grace's party. She'd never forgive me if I told her why you didn't come. You wouldn't tell her. No, he admitted. But you didn't know that when you made the threat, which makes it an empty threat, which... Good night, Ethan. He picked up his jacket. He was nearly at the door when he stopped and turned back. Olivia. His voice was different now, quieter, the way it got when the conversation shifted onto ground that mattered. What you said at the board meeting, about the veterans program. He paused. Marcus told me. I know you didn't. I know you wanted to tell me yourself. But he mentioned it when he dropped off the box. She held his gaze. I wasn't hiding it. I know you weren't. He was quiet for a moment. I just want you to know that it means something, even if I push back on it, even when I'm being difficult about it. He stopped. The men I served with deserve someone like you in their corner. I didn't know how to. I couldn't do it myself. I didn't have the I just couldn't. His voice was level, but she heard everything underneath it. So thank you for doing what I couldn't figure out how to do. She looked at him across the penthouse, at the man who had walked through every wall she'd ever built, not because he'd tried to, but because he was simply too real to be stopped by anything as insubstantial as her defenses. You kept me alive, she said. This seemed like a reasonable response. He nodded. He pulled the door open. 12 days, he said. I'll be there at 11. The door closed. She sat in the quiet of the kitchen for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and scrolled to a contact she hadn't called in 8 months. Joanna answered on the third ring, sounding slightly alarmed because Olivia never called without warning. Liv, is everything okay? Yes, Olivia said. Everything is yes. I just wanted to call. She paused. Is that all right? A silence. Then Joanna said, and her voice had changed, gone softer. Yeah, Liv. Of course it's all right. Of course. Olivia leaned against the counter. 40 floors below the city went on doing what it did. Tell me what's going on with you, she said. And she listened. She just listened. Grace Ward woke up at 5:47 on the morning of her 7th birthday. Ethan knew this because he heard her feet hit the floor. That specific small thud, followed by the particular quality of silence that meant she was standing in her room deciding whether she could justify coming down the hall yet. He lay in the dark and waited. 13 seconds later, his door opened 2 inches. Dad? It's not 6 yet, Grace. It's almost 6. Almost 6 is not 6. A pause. It's 5:47, which is 13 minutes from 6. Another pause, longer this time. He could feel her working through the arithmetic of whether 13 minutes was a negotiable distance. Can I come in and just lie here? I won't talk. He lifted the blanket. She crossed the room in 4 steps and climbed in beside him with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times. She smelled like sleep and the strawberry shampoo he bought because it was the one she'd picked off the shelf 8 months ago and never let him change. She lasted approximately 45 seconds before she said, Dad. Grace, I'm 7 today. I know. That's a lot. It is a lot. She was quiet again. He could feel her thinking the particular vibration of it, the way she got when something was working its way from the inside to the outside, and she was deciding whether to let it out. "Is she really coming?" Grace asked. "She said she is." "Your friend from the hospital?" "Yes." Another pause. "Is she nice?" "You said she was nice. Is she actually nice? Or is she the kind of grown-up who's nice in front of kids but then talks different when they think kids aren't listening?" Ethan looked at the ceiling in the dark. "She's actually nice," he said. "She might seem a little formal at first. She hasn't been around a lot of kids recently, but she's genuinely nice." "Okay," Grace said with the gravity of someone filing a verdict. Then, "Dad." "Yes." "I know you said the present's a surprise, but can you tell me if it's bigger than a bread box?" "What do you know about bread boxes?" "Grandma has one." "The present is bigger than a bread box." He heard her breath catch. Just slightly. Just enough. "Is it bigger than Dad? Is it bigger than the kitchen table?" "No." Is it the size of Dad? Is it?" She was trying to triangulate the dimensions through elimination, with the systematic logic of someone who was going to be very good at math, and the thought of it, the specific realness of this specific child, working this specific problem at 5:50 in the morning of her 7th birthday, hit him somewhere in the chest without warning. He thought, "Sarah, you would have loved this so much." He thought it the way he'd learned to think it, not as an open wound, not as a closing door, but as a fact he carried. Present tense. She would have loved this, the memory alive enough to know what she would have felt. "It's going to be worth the wait," he told Grace. "I promise." She settled against his side. "Okay," she said again, and then very quietly, in the voice she used when she was being sincere rather than negotiating, "Dad, this is going to be a good birthday." "Yeah, baby," he said. "It is." He meant it. He could feel that he meant it, not the performed optimism of a man saying what his child needed to hear, but the actual thing, the actual belief. He noticed the difference. He thought about what Olivia had said. The avoidance is not the solution. He thought about the yellow paint samples Grace had brought home from the hardware store spread across the kitchen table, while she debated between sunflower and marigold and buttercup with the seriousness of a Senate committee. He thought about how he'd sat there for 40 minutes helping her choose and how it had been, without reservation, one of the better 40 minutes of his recent life. He was starting to feel in the careful and deliberate way of a man who had been bracing for a long time, and was slowly by choice putting the brace down. He was starting to feel like something was beginning, not ending. Beginning. At 6:03, Grace decided this was close enough to 6, and sat up. "Okay," she announced. "It's birthday time." "It's birthday time," he agreed, and got up to make the pancakes. Olivia arrived at 11:04. Ethan heard the car in the driveway. Not her car, she wasn't driving yet. Patricia had brought her and came around the side of the house to meet her. She looked different outside the hospital, outside the penthouse. He wasn't sure what he'd expected. But it was this, and also not this. She was in a light jacket, her dark hair down rather than the professional arrangement she wore to everything else. And she was in the chair with the ease of someone who had made peace with what the chair meant, which was different. He was learning to notice from the performance of ease she'd worn in the hospital. This was something realer, something that had happened in the past 2 weeks. She looked at the house, at the small yard where his mother was setting up the folding table, and Dave from next door was arguing with a balloon that kept escaping his grip. At the yellow balloons and the paper plates and the completely non-corporate chaos of a child's birthday party in full setup. "It's lovely," she said. "It's a mess," he said. "It's a lovely mess." She looked at him. "How is she?" "She's been up since 5:47, and she's eaten approximately her own body weight in pancakes, and she told my mother 3 separate times that today was her birthday, in case my mother had forgotten." He paused. "She's perfect." Olivia smiled. The real one, not the controlled professional version. He'd learned the difference 2 weeks ago, and he hadn't forgotten it. "The telescope," she said. "Did you wrap it?" "Last night?" Grace helped my mother wrap some of the other presents, so I did it after they went to sleep. It took me 40 minutes because I'm bad at wrapping. How bad? There's tape holding tape together in at least 2 places. That's bad, she confirmed. I know. He walked beside her around to the backyard, the yard that was flat, that had a ramp on the porch that Dave had built for his mother's knee, and tried not to notice the particular care with which he'd arranged this, the specific attentiveness of it, because he didn't want to make a thing of it, didn't want her to have to acknowledge it, or thank him for it, or feel the weight of being considered. He'd just done it. The same way he'd done 100 things for 100 people, not because he wanted acknowledgement, but because it was right. She noticed anyway. He could tell by the way she said nothing, which was different from not noticing. Grace spotted Olivia from across the yard, with the unerring radar of a child locked onto a new person. She stopped mid-sentence, in whatever she'd been telling her grandmother pivoted entirely, and crossed the yard with the directness of someone who had decided a thing was going to happen. She stopped about 2 feet in front of Olivia's chair, looked at her. With precisely the same assessing cataloging look that Ethan used on situations he was trying to understand, which he had never until this moment seen on his daughter's face, quite so clearly. Olivia held the look without flinching. She met Grace's eyes and held them evenly, like someone who had decided to be exactly herself, and let that be enough. "Your dad's friend," Grace said. "From the hospital." "Yes," Olivia said. "My name is Olivia. You're Grace." "It's my birthday." "I know. Happy birthday." Grace tilted her head. "Are you okay now? Dad said you got hurt?" "I'm much better now," Olivia said. "Your dad helped." Grace glanced at Ethan, back at Olivia. "He does that," she said. "He's good at it." "He really is," Olivia said. Something settled in Grace's expression. A verdict reached by some internal process that Ethan couldn't fully follow, but recognized because it was the same process he used. "We have juice boxes," Grace told Olivia. "And there's cake later. Dad made it, which means it's probably going to look bad, but taste good, because that's always what happens when Dad bakes." "Grace," Ethan said. "It's true," Grace said without looking at him. "It's true." Ethan confirmed, looking at Olivia. Olivia was smiling fully openly without managing it. "That sounds like exactly the right kind of cake," she said. Grace seemed to find this an acceptable answer. "Okay," she said, and turned and ran back toward her grandmother, apparently satisfied. Olivia looked at Ethan. "She's extraordinary," she said. "I know," he said. He said it the way he always said it, without hedging, without the false modesty he applied to himself. When it came to Grace, he never deflected. "I know she is." The party settled into itself the way small real parties do, not smoothly, but warmly. Dave managed the balloon situation eventually. Ethan's mother Ruth, who had been told very little about Olivia, but had that particular quality of mothers who needed very little information to form accurate impressions, brought Olivia a glass of lemonade within 4 minutes of her arrival, and sat beside her for 20 minutes talking about nothing consequential and everything important, which was a skill Ruth had developed over 71 years and deployed with precision. Ethan watched this from across the yard while flipping burgers with Dave and tried not to let on that he was watching. Dave noticed. Dave always noticed. "That's the woman from the hospital," Dave said. Not a question. "Yes. She seems," Dave considered the word, "real." "Yeah," Ethan said. "She is." Dave nodded. He flipped his own burger. "Ruth likes her." "I can see that." "Ruth doesn't like most people quickly." "I know that too." Dave looked at him. Dave was 59, a retired electrician, a widower of 4 years. A man who expressed his entire inner life through the particular quality of silence he held in different situations. This silence meant, "I see what's happening, and I'm not going to make it awkward by saying so, but I want you to know I see it." Ethan nodded at him without speaking. Dave went back to his burgers. The presents came after lunch. Grace had over the course of the morning correctly identified that the large wrapped object was the present of greatest significance. She had circled it. She had measured it with her arms at least twice. She had asked Ethan once more if it was bigger than the kitchen table, and he had said yes, no wait, no, not quite, and her eyes had gone wide. She sat on the grass, her grandmother beside her. Dave on the other side. Olivia, a little apart in her chair, but not far, not excluded, just at the edge of the circle, in the way she held herself in spaces, which was the way of someone who had learned not to expect to be centered, and was still learning that she could choose differently. Grace tore into the wrapping paper with the focused destruction of a child who had been exercising enormous patience and had decided patience was officially over. The tape gave. The paper fell away. The box appeared. Grace went very still. She looked at the box. She looked at her father. Back at the box. She knew what it was. The image on the side was unmistakable, but the knowing and the seeing were doing different things to her face. "Dad," she said, very quietly. "Happy birthday, baby." "Is this—" She stopped. She pressed both palms flat against the side of the box. "This is a real one. It's a real one. Not a toy one. A real actual telescope, Grace." "Yes." She looked up at him. Her eyes were full. She was working very hard. He could see it, to manage the feeling, to hold it down, to not let it overflow in front of everyone. She was 6 years old, and she was running the faucet in her face. "Hey," he said, and went down on one knee in front of her. "Hey, none of that." "I'm not," she started. "You can cry," he said. "You're allowed." She looked at him. The tears came. Not a flood. Grace did nothing as dramatically as a flood, just a slow, genuine overflow, the kind that can't be held back once you've given yourself permission. He pulled her into him. She held on. He held on back. "It's so good," she said into his shoulder. "Dad, it's so good." "I know," he said. "I know, baby." He heard from somewhere to his left a small sound. He looked up. Olivia was not crying. That was too strong a word for what was on her face. But her eyes were bright. She looked at him, and there was something in her expression that went beyond what she usually let him see, unguarded, unmanaged, entirely present. He held her gaze for a moment. She gave him a small nod. The particular nod that meant this. "This is what it's supposed to look like." He nodded back. Grace pulled back, wiped her face with the back of her hand, with no particular self-consciousness, and looked at the box again. "Can I set it up today?" "Tonight," he said. "We can set it up tonight. And look at stars. If it's clear." "What if it's not clear?" "Then tomorrow night." "What if it's not clear tomorrow?" "Grace, we will find you a clear night. I promise." She considered this, accepted it. Then she looked past him at Olivia with the directness she brought to everything. "Thank you," she said. "It's from you too. Dad didn't say, but I figured." Olivia looked at her. "How did you figure?" "Because it's really good," Grace said. "Dad's good at a lot of things, but he always says he's bad at knowing which things are the best things. He says that's what other people are for." She looked at Ethan. "I figured you helped pick the best one?" Ethan looked at his daughter. He thought about what Olivia had said weeks ago, she's going to be a CEO. He thought it was possible she was right. "We picked it together," Olivia said. "More or less." Grace nodded. She seemed satisfied. "Can you come back sometime?" she said to Olivia. "To see the stars, Dad says you can see the rings of Saturn with this one." "I'd like that very much," Olivia said. Grace nodded again with the decisive satisfaction of someone whose party had gone exactly as planned. Then she turned to Dave and announced that it was time for cake, and the afternoon moved forward. It was 2 weeks later that the press conference happened. Olivia hadn't told Ethan about it in advance, which was a choice she'd made carefully, and not without some argument with herself. She'd considered telling him. She'd picked up the phone twice. But she knew him well enough now to know that if she told him, he would find a way to talk her out of it, or redirect it, or minimize the specific thing she was trying to do. He was too good at that. She needed to do this without him managing it. The Heart Foundation's annual gala had historically been a polished event with a predictable structure. Donor recognition program highlights a keynote from Olivia that was professional and well-crafted and said everything correctly and moved no one in particular. She'd given that keynote 4 times. She could have given it in her sleep. This year she threw out the keynote. She stood at the podium. She stood because she had good days, and she chose to use them. And because this was a moment that she wanted to be standing for, and she looked at the assembled donors and board members and press, and she said what was true. She said, 12 days after the accident that brought me to St. Haven Hospital, I sat in a room and had the most honest conversation I'd had in years. I want to tell you something about the man I had that conversation with, because he's the reason this foundation is changing, and he deserves to have that said out loud. She told them about Ethan. Not everything that wasn't hers to tell, but enough. The combat medic, the Silver Star, the night shift, the daughter, the breakfast at 6, the particular quality of a man who had been showing up quietly and without acknowledgement for people who needed him his entire adult life. She said, he taught me something that I thought I understood and didn't. Leadership isn't the accumulation of power. It isn't the management of image. It is at its most essential, the willingness to show up for someone else when showing up costs you something. He does that every day. He has done it every day for years, and nobody knew. She paused. The Heart Foundation is going to do better, she said. We're going to fund the programs that don't make the front page, the after-school programs, the veterans transition, support the things that happen in community centers, and hospital corridors, and small backyards, where a man makes pancakes at 6 in the morning for his daughter. That's where the real work is. That's where it's always been. I should have been paying closer attention. There was a silence in the room, the kind that meant something had landed. She said one more thing, the last thing. She'd written it and rewritten it, and eventually deleted all the versions and decided to say it without writing it down. A man told me I was going to see the sunrise, she said. When I was on a gurney at 3 in the morning and I wasn't certain of very much. He said it like it was already true. I want to spend the next part of my life being the kind of person who says that to people. Not because I know the outcome, but because sometimes the truest thing you can do for someone is to believe in the outcome when they can't. She stepped back from the podium. The applause was not the polite, rhythmic applause of a successful corporate event. It was the other kind. The kind that meant people had felt something they hadn't expected to feel. Ethan saw the clip at 6:30 in the morning standing in his kitchen while Grace ate cereal. His mother had sent it a text that said, "Only watch this," and a link. He watched it on his phone, with one hand on the counter. He watched her say his name. He stood very still for a moment. Grace looked up from her cereal. "Dad? What's wrong?" "Nothing." He said, "Nothing's wrong. You look like something." "I look like what?" "Like the face you make when something is a lot," she said. "Not bad a lot, just a lot." He looked at his daughter. He thought about how she'd been watching him for 3 years, learning what he looked like, cataloging his expressions, trying to understand the world through him. He thought about what she'd seen in those 3 years, all the things she'd correctly filed, and all the things she'd let him keep private. "Yeah," he said. "It's a lot." "Good a lot." "Good a lot," he said. He texted Olivia, "I saw it." She replied in under a minute, "I know. Your mother called me last night to tell me she was going to send it to you." He stared at this. "My mother called you. She has my number. She asked for it at the party. I assumed you knew." He had not known. He made a mental note to have a conversation with Ruth about this, and then immediately understood that the conversation would go exactly nowhere because Ruth had decided something, and Ruth's decisions were geological in their permanence. He typed, "You didn't tell me you were going to do that." A pause. Then I know. Are you angry? He thought about it. He thought about standing at a podium and saying someone's name out loud to a room full of people, saying it like it mattered, like the saying of it was itself a thing that needed to be done. He thought about 2 years of being invisible, and the particular relief, strange and unfamiliar as it was, of being seen. No, he typed. Thank you. You don't have to thank me. I know. Thank you anyway. Another pause. Pancakes this morning. Always pancakes. Good, she sent back. That's the right answer. He put the phone in his pocket. He turned back to Grace. She had finished her cereal and was looking at him with that expression, the one that meant she'd assessed the situation and had reached a position. Dad, she said. Is Olivia your friend or your just friend? He looked at her. What's the difference? Friend is different. Grace said with the authority of someone who had clearly given this taxonomy significant thought. Friend is like you think about them when they're not there. Just friend is normal. He was quiet for a moment. Where did you get that distinction? Mia explained it to me, Grace said. She has a very organized way of thinking about things. She does. Ethan agreed. He picked up Grace's bowl and brought it to the sink. He thought about what she'd asked. He thought about the honest answer. Friend, he said. Grace absorbed this. He could hear her filing it. Okay, she said. And then, with the precision of someone landing a point, I knew. Did you? She looks at you the same way you look at her, Grace said, like you're both checking if the other one is okay. She slid off her stool. That's friend. Just friends don't do that. She picked up her backpack from the chair where she'd left it. She kissed him on the cheek, which she still did every morning, which he would never in his life take for granted. Love you, Dad. Love you, Grace. Have a good day. I always do, she said with the perfect and entirely sincere confidence of a 7-year-old who had in fact been having pretty good days. The door closed. He stood in the kitchen in the morning quiet and thought about everything she'd just said. He thought about the way Olivia had looked at him across a birthday party while his daughter cried into his shoulder. He thought about a woman who had called her sister after years of silence and then called him the next morning to tell him about it unprompted, just because she'd wanted to tell someone. He thought about what it meant to stop bracing. He hadn't stopped entirely. That was too much to ask of a body that had been braced for 2 years, that had made an art of the bracing. But he was learning to notice when he was doing it, to put it down sometimes deliberately and feel the difference. He thought about what was next. The Foundation's Veterans Initiative, which had a first planning meeting in 3 weeks. His name was on the agenda, not as a donor, not as a recipient, but as a consultant, which was a word that didn't quite fit the way he understood himself, but which he was trying on carefully to see if it would. He thought about a conversation he'd had with his old commanding officer, Colonel Briggs, who had called 2 days after the press conference because his daughter had sent him the clip. Briggs had said in that dry Tennessee way he had, "Ward, I'm going to skip past the part where I tell you I told you so, and get directly to saying it would have been a damn shame if nobody ever figured out who you are." And Ethan had said, "Sir, I figured out who I am." And Briggs had said, "I know. That's not who I was talking about. I was talking about everybody else." He thought the colonel was right. He thought that was worth something. He picked up his phone one more time. He opened the last text from Olivia. He looked at it for a moment. Then he typed, "Clear skies tonight. You should come look at Saturn's rings." A pause longer than usual, which meant she was deciding something. Then, what time 8? Grace's idea. Tell her I'll be there. He put the phone down. He poured himself a coffee, a good one. Not the hospital machine kind, the real kind, the kind he made at home with beans Grace had helped him pick because she'd been very interested in the smell of coffee lately, which was an interest he was not encouraging, but also not discouraging. He stood at his kitchen counter and drank it while it was still hot. That was new. That was something that had changed. He'd spent 2 years drinking cold coffee because he'd forgotten it, or set it down to do something else, or simply hadn't thought to stop and drink it while it was the right temperature. Small thing. The smallest possible thing. He drank the coffee. He thought about tonight. About a 7-year-old in the backyard with her telescope pointed at the sky, finding Saturn for the first time, losing her mind over the rings. About his mother, who would probably invite herself, and who was absolutely right to. About Dave, who would come over the fence with a lawn chair because that was what Dave did. About Olivia Hart in a chair that was part of her life, and not the whole of it, tipping her head back to look at a sky that was the same sky for all of them. He thought about sunrises, about next things, about the particular kind of courage it took not to charge a hill under fire, but to set down the armor on an ordinary morning and choose to be a person who was present for his own life. He'd learned that from her. She'd learned it from him. That was how it worked. Sometimes people teaching each other the specific thing they'd forgotten they knew, meeting in the middle of the night in a fluorescent hallway with their whole lives at stake. And somehow, by some grace, neither of them had planned for finding their way to the other side of it. He washed his cup. He went to work. And that night, under a clear sky, Grace Ward pressed her eye to a telescope for the first time, and went completely still, and then said very softly, "Oh, just that. Just the one syllable. The sound of a child encountering something too big for words." And Ethan stood behind her with his hand light on her shoulder, and Olivia sat beside them both, and the rings of Saturn were exactly where they were supposed to be, exactly as real as promised. Some things, it turned out, were exactly what they said they were. Some people were too.